Hello again. Welcome to part D of video 5. My name is Andy Menon. In this video, we are going to learn how to update existing records using the data context feature of UiPath Apps. Let's get started. As usual is the case, we are going to start off from the point where the user has already selected a record, right? A record of interest that is either going to be updated or deleted. In the current situation, this record is going to be updated by changing one or more values of the selected record that we see here on the screen, and then by hitting the update button, right? Now, I believe that this part of the video is going to be a lot easier because if you have watched the preceding parts of video 5, you will realize that we have done majority of the work to get up to this point, right? So what I mean by that is the record has already been selected by the user. The record is visible in this update form here, right? And the values of the selected record have been populated to the form controls of the update form. Now, all of that has been made possible because we have bound the data context to this update form. We have already done the work in the preceding videos, right? So this is great because all we have left is to understand what this update button does. In the previous video, when we discussed the functionality of the delete button, you saw that the delete was performed after a confirmation was obtained by the user, right? So when we click delete, a pop-up form appeared, and then a message stating that this record is going to be deleted was shown on the screen. And then the user had to confirm, yes, this record needs to be permanently deleted, right? And that's because a delete operation is a pretty serious operation, right? Now, the update operation, on the other hand, could also be designed the same way, meaning if we clicked on the update button after we performed the update on the record, then you could have a confirmation dialog stating, do you want to proceed with the update, right? You could design the app that way. But in this case, I have not done that. And it is something that the audience would like to try out by themselves based on what you have learned from this video. So in this case, what's going to happen is we are going to keep things a lot simpler. Basically, what I mean by that is when the user makes a change to the values of this form and hits update, a permanent update operation happens on the backend data service record. There is no confirmation being asked. It's straight away an update operation, right? So this is something that you might want to take into consideration when you build your app, right? So let's jump on this update button and understand how it works. So we are back in App Studio, and I am here on the main form that's called the Demo Survey Manager Enhanced form. And here we see our update form open within this page container, right? So in order to get at the update button, we have to open the update form. So I'm going to go down and open up the update form. So first off, clicking on the update form, you can see that the data context has been assigned to this form. And then the data values that come from the backend data service record have been assigned to each of these form controls by referring to their data context fields. For example, if we look at the first name, here the record is bound by using the data context and the name of the entity field. And we saw how we did that in part B of video 5, right? So all of those values now are available to us for update. And now we get into the update button. As usual is the case, we first hide the update form by setting this app variable to true. And then we invoke the create or update entity record rule. And as you saw in the previous video, what we are doing here is the entity that needs to be updated has to be sourced from the data context, right? So what we do here is we go down into the data context section, and then we look for the entity record that's been bound to this data context. And in this case, the container to which the data context has been bound to is the update form. And then we drag this entity record here. So once the entity record has been assigned to this field here, then the list of entity fields will show up here. And what we have to do is to map the values that are going to be either updated back to the entity in the backend data service, or going to be returned unchanged, right? Now, if you look at the columns, the first name, last name, and survey ID and response ID, these are largely not updated, right? And that is because if you look at the front end, here the first and last names are bound to label controls, right? And therefore, we have to return these values back to the backend data service unchanged, even if you're not changing them. That is because the fields that you're seeing here with these asterisk signs, they are marked required, right? And therefore, you have to assign them a value. Now, in this case, because you have not changed them, the values that are going to be returned back are going to come from the data context, right? So what you do is you come to the data context section and then select the corresponding data context fields, and then you drag them in here and you assign them back to these columns that are not going to be changed. This is one part of it. Now, the other part of it is to assign values that are going to be changed via the update form, right? When you change the values on the form, what happens is the updated values that are going to be assigned back to the data service entity are going to come from the value attributes of the input controls, right? So if I click on this input here, the value that is going to be assigned to days of the week that is going to be updated will come from the update form. And if you go down in that update form, this is the name of the field. It's called text days spent per week. And that value attribute is going to be dragged into this assignment on the right. Similarly, if you look at the favorite skill, and if I click on the favorite skill assignment, I go into the update form again and look at the list favorite skill. Here again, you pick up the selected value attribute and you assign it to the mapping of your data service entity. So once you have done that, you have pretty much set up the steps required for you to update the data service entity record to the backend. So we are going to switch back to the form, and we are going to perform an update for the sake of completeness. So I'm going to change this value here to say databases, and 4.99, and I'm going to hit update. And there it is. The record has been updated successfully. You can already see that the record has been refreshed, and the new value of databases and 4.99 is already appeared here. And if I click on it, that updated record is now available to me with the most recent values. Now we'll take a short trip of how a new record is created. I'm saying short because creating a new record does not use the data context feature. So everything that you see here, as far as the new response functionality is concerned, is pretty much the same as what we have seen in the previous videos, but we'll go through this feature quickly nonetheless, right? So we do that by jumping straight into the functionality of the new response button. So we are back in the App Studio, and I am on the main demo survey manager enhanced form. And the new response button is on this page, unlike the update and delete buttons that are in a different form that is open inside of this page container. The new response is right here for us to access. So clicking on new response, the first thing that we do is we hide the update form. It's obvious because now we are creating a new record, and therefore there is no reason for the updated record to remain visible. So we are going to hide that section of the page. And then we skip all the steps that we have covered before. And here we are opening the insert form. Now, the difference here is, unlike in the previous versions of the application, this insert form opens up as a popover form, right? So if I go back into my app and hit new response, the form here, the update form here is hidden, and then the form to create a new record pops up, right? Here, it can be seen that the mechanics of this form are pretty much the same as what we created in our previous videos, including the validations. One important thing to remember when we go back into the design of the create new record form, and that form is named survey insert form. So if I go into that form and click on the form page, you will see that there is no data context, right? Unlike you saw in the update and delete operations, there's no data context. The second thing visually that you see here is the form controls are laid out horizontally, as opposed to what you saw previously. They were all laid out vertically, one below the other. And then talking about the form controls, if we click on them, notice that they are assigned to app variables, right? We are not assigning them to anything related to data context, right? So everything that you see here is pretty much as it was in the previous applications. And therefore, now what we do is, once we filled out this form, we get into the submit button. And if we look at the rule behind the submit button, here is the create or update entity record rule again. But this time, remember, we are not pulling the entity from the data context. Remember, we are creating a new entity record. We are not updating an existing record, or we are not deleting an existing record. Therefore, the concept of pulling the entity record from the data context does not exist. So if I click on this, I have pulled this reference from the entities. So here we pull in the preferred skill profile. I'm going through this again because if you look at preferred skill profile, it looks like it has been pulled from the data context, but it isn't. It has to be pulled in from the entities reference of your UiPath app, right? So that is something to remember. And once we do that, as usual is the case, all the entity fields will drop down on the left, and then we have to assign the values on the right. Now, this time, remember, you have bound the new record form, or the form to create the new record, to app variables. And therefore, any values that you are now using to create the new entity record has to come from these app variables. And that's another difference when it comes to creating a brand new record versus updating or deleting a record using the data context. And if you want to see the details of how this form was constructed, along with all the expressions and functions that were used to create these validations, you can go back to the previous videos on UiPath apps and data service integrations. And you can also see them here once I share this application with you along with this video. And just to round off this section of the discussion, I'm going to just create a new record. And there it is, the new response has been created, and we see the new record that's been created right here. And if I click on it again, that record is available to me for update or delete using the data context. That is all for this video, and this concludes the entire video 5 series of the UiPath Apps Data Context discussion. And what we have done in this video, just to recap, is we learned how to use the UiPath Data Context feature, and we also saw how we could update or delete a record using the data context feature. And we rounded off the entire discussion by uh, taking a brief overview of how to create a new record. And we also saw what the differences were when it comes to creating a new record that does not use the data context, and also the update or delete operations that use the data context feature of UiPath apps. If you like this content, please do like and subscribe to my channel, and I truly appreciate your support. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.